Hi everyone, welcome back. It has certainly been a while. A few months ago, I moved from the great state of Texas back to Hartford, Connecticut, just to be a little bit closer to family and friends, which definitely disrupted my setup. And also, I didn't really have too many ideas for new decks, new ideas, new strategies to bring to you. Uh, you know, in the last BNR when Wizards announced no changes for Legacy, it felt like the metagame was largely cemented for Eternal Weekend. There wasn't much to do innovative wise, but Edge of Eternities did bring us a powerful new card in Quantum Riddler that has opened up some things for me, and I think is worth looking into. So, the deck I've brought today is a blue-white blink deck, taking advantage of this card and also getting to play a lot of, we'll say, like hate cards or specific techie cards for the metagame that you wanted to play but didn't necessarily have a great home, certainly not in the main deck, but that this deck kind of allows you to do. So the reason Quantum Riddler is so good is because, because obviously if you read it on its face, 5 mana for a 4/6 when an ETB's draw card is very slow. However, it does have this warp ability for 1 in blue, which means that you can play it for that cost. It sits in play at the end of turn, it goes to the exile zone, and then later on you can cast it for the full 5 mana. Most of the time you would prefer not to do that. Most of the time you would prefer to flicker it with Phelia. This is a combo that's seeing play in Modern to some extent, and has proven itself there, and I think it's reasonable here too. Phelia also lines up reasonably well versus certain parts of the metagame. Like any Stompy deck playing Chalice or Chrome Mox, Phelia can do a good job when it blinks that. Obviously a lot of internal consistency here with, blinking your Planeswalkers to reset their loyalty. If you have a Containment Priest in play, you can target your opponent's creatures and they don't come back, they go into exile. If you have a Consign to Memory, you can target something from your opponent's side of the field and then Consign the return trigger, basically turning this into a very powerful, removal spell. And Containment Priest and Consign are examples of cards where I think they're quite well positioned against the top of the metagame. Containment Priest lines up quite well versus Blue Black Reanimator, lines up quite well versus Oops All Spells, and then even the Nadu decks sometimes will play Green Sun Zenith, which this can stop, or the Cephalid Illusionist half of the combo. While you're milling your deck and bringing back a Thassa's Oracle, this can stop as well. Consign similar things, can stop the ETB trigger from the big creatures in Blue Black Reanimator, can stop the ETB of Battleship Spy, or can consign the Goblin Charbelcher after sideboard. So again, cards that you would like to play against the metagame that have internal consistency within the deck, so the floor on them is much higher, I think is very powerful, very worth looking into. Additionally, you get to play Tamiyo alongside Karakas, which is very powerful synergy. Just getting to protect your Tamiyo from removal kind of ensures that it's going to give you card advantage over the game. But there haven't been too many decks in the metagame that could play these two cards in the format. A lot of blue-black is where we see Tamiyo most frequently. So we are going to take this through a 3-match set. Very unfortunately, I played this in a challenge yesterday and did record my games. However, the audio from them was somewhat corrupted and not really usable. So I'm going to bring you a 3-match set. I did make some small updates from the challenge list, cut some of the cutesy cards and added just more powerful things. In the sideboard, I have a little bit more Graveyard Hate and Rest in Peace and Sanctifier en-Vec. These are kind of nice in that they are reasonably good against either half of the game plan from Blue-Black Reanimator, where if they pivot into a creature plan, Rest in Peace obviously is quite good against Barrogoyf. It makes Murktide uncastable. Sanctifier is obviously, moat for a black creature, while also handling the graveyard. Celestial Purge is an answer to Kaito. A deck like this can struggle with Kaito just because it has hexproof. So Celestial Purge being able to handle that is quite nice. And obviously there are some red stuff running around in the format as well, like Steel Cutter, things like that. So I would say that this card, the main target with this in mind in the deck is Kaito, but obviously has some other application. Yeah, let's hop into our 3-match set. All right, here for round 1, we're on the play. This hand is interesting. I'm going to keep this Force of Will blue card. Potentially a little bit land heavy, so we'll see how things play out. Opponent is on 5 cards, which certainly biases me towards combo. Means the Force of Will is quite good. Dress Down's also good if it's Oops All Spells. Wooded Foothills is maybe combo. I think I fetch Island here. I don't want to draw Island. I think I just do this. We'll see what the opponent is doing. There could be some sort of land strategy. Commercial District, certainly more likely to be in lands than some other deck, we'll say. Ancient Tomb. What's happening here? Fable. I think I want to force that, pitching Stern Scolding. They don't have too many. This is like an initiative deck. There's not too many. I'm going to save this for Brainstorm. If I draw Brainstorm, I want to have a fetch land. There's not too many low toughness creatures to counter with Stern Scolding, so I think Dress Down will have more application, and at the very worst, it can cycle. Drawing the Containment Priest right after the Fable is a little bit tough, just because you could have made an argument. If I'd known this was coming... Oh, interesting. I could have made an argument to let the Fable resolve, because the Containment Priest counters the 3rd chapter effectively, where if Fable flips, it comes back as a creature, and at that point, it will get exiled by the Containment Priest. I'm going to be honest, I'm not quite sure what my opponent is up to. Blue-red food chain, maybe like a goblins-based food chain. That is certainly a possibility. Tamiyo seems like a reasonable draw, so I will play it out. My opponent has decided to play out Questing Druid. Seems reasonable. I am going to try and pressure their life total as best I can. We start with a Teferi tick up. Attack with my creatures. And I'm going to crack this clue right away. I wouldn't mind flipping Tamiyo, potentially. Get back a Force of Will. Put back some lands, plus the Tamiyo. Swords of Plowshares and or Force blue card. Both seem good. So here, I think I just swords the Druid, so that they can't use it for mana. I think I let this resolve. That could be a little foolish. Because if they have another source of red, they can make infinite creature mana this turn. If I Force of Will this, I think I can just push for lethal if I Force of Will this. If I Force of Will this, they go to 4. I bring back Force of Will and have them going to 2 next turn, potentially. And I'm threatening to bounce the... I'm struggling to think of what would be a good draw here. I guess I'm just not 100% sure of the opponent's deck. I guess I'll put this on top of my library. So plus this. Mine is here on Force of Will. Hit them to 4. Ancient Tomb definitely on my team this game. We can hope. And so one of these is shut off. Right now they only have 4 mana showing. So I can Force of Will a creature. And then next turn I can bounce the food chain, and they can't do everything at once, is my hope, at the very least. This is looking like, we'll say like, it's playing a lot of the same cards as Mono Red Prison, but then it just has green for the food chain combo, and Questing Druid is obviously a combo where it's like, you cast Squee a bunch of times, Questing Druid gets arbitrarily large. I think we might have just threaded the needle here, in terms of, I think my opponent had like 2 more life, or 1 more red mana. They might have been able to pull out a win with what we're showing, but I think we painted over the finish line here. Opponent's really struggling to figure out what to do. They keep tapping their tomb and tapping it. They're going through every single line, but none of them works. I understand that feeling for sure, we'll say. They've decided to do something. They cast Seek the Beast, which means this is just finding other spells, but I don't care about other spells. I only care about the first creature they put onto the stack, because that's what gets the food chain started. It's important when you're playing control and you're ahead to think about what you lose to in that spot, just because you could be tempted to just be like, oh, and the thing is, this is true. When my opponent casts Seek the Beast here, that's a desperate play, right? It's a desperation play. It means they feel like they don't have what they need to win in their hand. However, you can also surmise that if you counter it, your shields are down, and if they do have a creature card in hand, then that would be enough to potentially win. And so you can say, like, yes, this is desperate. And most of the time, when you stop a desperation play, your opponent isn't going to have cards in hand to win the game. But technically, that's still unknown information. So you should really take some time to think about, like, how necessary is it that this card gets countered. Here at 2 life, I think there's nothing they can do with 1 mana showing. Another Druid, and hopefully attack for lethal. Cool. And we got there. Okay, Hydroblast seems good. What else seems good? Maybe Prismatic Ending to count, answer Chrome Mox, House of the Void, things like that. I think Wrath of the Skies. I think this. They're probably still a 1-ring deck, which means I think I want Clarion Conqueror and Null Rod. Obviously, at this point, we're getting into the realm of we're not entirely sure what's going on, right? So it can be hard to know exactly how to play against it. Usually against like these prison decks, I'm a fan of cutting Minor Misstep. Same with Stern Scolding, and I like to trim. I like to trim on Ponder and Tamiyo because they play the Chalice a bit. They're a little bit slow. You kind of just want to draw the goods and play them. You draw them. And I think 1 Containment Priest can go. And then I think we try it like this. And then we reevaluate after. If there's a game 3, we can reevaluate to see if we want to make any changes. Okay. This one's awkward because the spells are good, but the mana's not. I think you just have to keep Force Blue card Hydroblast against your red prison deck opponent. And unfortunately, I will have to force this Chalice of the Void. And that's like a pretty good draw, actually. I'm going to leave up Hydroblast for like, Magus of the Moon shenanigans. Because, you lead on Tundra. It really incentivizes them to play out any Blood Moon if they have it. Unfortunately, that's not what they have. They have a Chalice. And I get maximum punished for not playing my Ponder. Maximum is a little bit strong. I suppose this turn I just play out the Riddler. Oh, no, I lied. This turn I'm going to play out the Phelia. And, Phelia, obviously, you're playing it in the deck because it goes well with Quantum Riddler, but obviously it also has applications against, opponents playing Chalice the Void. It can shrink that. That is fine. I think a little not fine, but it's going to happen, we can say. So now I have lines. I could flicker the token, or I could flicker the Chalice and Hydroblast the Goblin Shaman. I think I want to... I don't want to play Riddler here because I don't want to flicker that. I think I just want to flicker the Shaman token and leave up Dress Down. And I'll put a stop at the end of my opponent's second main phase because I might just want to Dress Down to cycle it. But I don't want to. If I don't want to do it in the end step because I want my Phelia to have abilities when when it attacks. Part of my thought process here is a lot of things that kill Phelia here are ETBs like Pyrogoyf, Fury, these sorts of things. Unfortunately, I cannot Hydroblast this as much as I want to. But that's fine. Okay, Taiga, another Chalice. We'll see if they play the Chalice or if they play the Questing Druid here. If they play the Druid, I might just respond with the Dress Down. This one I don't care about. I'm going to let it resolve. I will play the Dress Down just to cycle. Try to find a land drop, I guess. I think I just play the Quantum Riddler and just put a lot of pressure on the board. With 2 Chalices, I can't unlock my 1-drops this turn. I have Force of Negation as some amount of interaction. And they have 2 Ancient Tombs in play. Like another factor here for sure. Malevolent Rumble. I guess I'm going to Force of Negation this and just pitch a Ponder. Because the thing is, this could find creatures, is my thought process. Taiga Recruiter. I don't think that's going to be enough. You can't Recruiter for Fury, so I think this is going to be enough for lethal. Yeah, I think I just play the Teferi, bounce the Reflection, and then attack for lethal. Okay, cool, got there. Like I mentioned in the deck tech, I do think this has a reasonable prison matchup. You just have really good mana, so you usually don't have to care about Blood Moon. Prison kind of struggles with board presence a lot of the time, and so the fact that you can sometimes get a Quantum Riddler into play early on is important. And then Phelia also really messes up these, artifacts that they're playing, where it's like you can flicker this, and they have to either make it stop losing mana or stop making mana or lose a card from hand. You can flicker this, and then effectively counters Chalice, etc., etc. Yeah, right. On to the next round. All right, back for round 2. We are on the play. This hand is so close, but I think with Minor Misstep and Consign and Force, we have so many opportunities to just draw a land. Like, it feels like you only have 1 draw step, quote unquote, to draw your second land. But in reality, because you have interaction, it's like buying you extra turns to find what you need. So I'm actually going to run with this. Also, it's like if you force a will pretty low, Quantum Riddler can help you. Like, let's say I draw like another Force of Will instead of a land, and I go down a lot of cards. Eventually, when I draw a Quantum Riddler, I'm more likely to get the extra draw from it, etc. So I think we're gonna try this out. Could be stupid, could be terrible, Looks like opponent might be on, some Underground Sea Thoughtseize deck. Could be Blue-Black Reanimator, could be something else. We have 20 lands, we have cantrips as well. I think this is close to reasonable. Consign can also help, right? Where you can consign the Atraxa ETB. That's what they're doing. Obviously, then at that point, they still have the 7/7 in play, but we play Source of Plowshares, we have Teferis, we have Karakas, we can draw 2. See what they did with their Ponder. Went, did not shuffle off Ponder. Ooh, okay, second Teferi, less than ideal for sure. But they did not have Entomb, so that's obviously somewhat good for us. I am going to Force of Will this, and I will pitch one of the Teferis. It's just so far away from being cast. Okay. Opponent brainstorms in response to this Force of Will, which is good because it means that no matter what, the Tamiyo won't flip this turn, which is good for me. That did just happen. Fortunately, they had a second Tamiyo. Okay, Flooded Strand. That's not bad as far as things that do something are concerned. I think I'm behind enough that I'm just going to tap out for a Riddler here. And, if they go into Reanimate, it is what it is. I think progressing my game plan is somewhat important here. And I think I might try to consign my Riddler Warp if we get another turn. But we'll see what happens, obviously. Opponent plays Murktide Regent, and it's big. Not good for me. So they're more likely to be tempo at this point, I feel. But that's kind of the issue, right? Is that you can't really know at first. Yeah, sure. I'll consign this. It at least stops the Tamiyo from attacking. I get to keep the 4/6 in play. I want to keep playing long enough to hopefully figure out what they're doing, but we might not get that opportunity. Okay, we got the opportunity. We figured it out. Okay, cool. Good games. Okay, so kept it a little bit of a speculative one. I think in the dark it's probably fine. Certainly a bit of a bad run out for us. I like doing this, and I like setting Force Negation, back to basics. The Consigns are not completely dead cards, but I think there's just better options. Like cutting Narset and like cutting one Force of Will. This is kind of a hedge. Like you could ask, like, why aren't you bringing in Surgical? But I think that between the Containment Priests and Rest in Peace Sanctifier and then Macabre, I have enough Graveyard Hate, and you don't want to go too far in that direction, because if they pivot into like a more tempo game plan, you want to be able to not have dead cards in your hand. So that's kind of why I like cards like Rest in Peace and Sanctifier, where like this is good against Barrowgoyf and Murktide Regent. This is good against just general, all their black creatures, etc. Containment Priest can at least, block a Bowmaster, etc. Works with Phelia. So this is what I'm trying out, just because I don't fully know how they're sideboarding and if they're cutting the graveyard stuff or not. Kind of one of the strengths of the deck. Alright, this hand seems solid. I'm going to keep and play the Tamiyo. Interesting, they're just going to discard. So I think I'm actually just going to play out the Containment Priest before they have Daze up. Because they would need double force, double blue card to handle this. But I think doing this before they have Daze up is more important than like hiding the fact that I have it, right? I just lose to a lot more things at that point. Not even considering like they're drawing an extra card, so they could draw more interaction. Okay, so basically we have to force back. So now, of course, they're quite behind, right? They did not play a land drop on their turn. And we're on the board. They went to discard on turn 1, which is like, is and isn't important. It's like, they're not really down a card because the Archon, they want it in the graveyard, but we can also kind of intuit that because they took this line, they have a Reanimate in hand, which right now we are blanking as well. That's quite good. I am going to Surveil. I really would like to find a blue card for this Force of Will. So this is an important lesson, which is that, a lot of times people like to, hide their tricks to the last possible moment. They like to be very tricky, but sometimes it can just be better to not let your opponent know let your opponent know what you're doing, but play around more things, right? Where, I went through my thought process. I want to play around Daze here. Don't want to let them draw an extra card to potentially look for another Force of Will. Things of this nature. Interesting that they binned the Murktide. Feels like they might have another one in hand. So I guess I let that happen. And then they would need Double Daze as the last 2 cards. So it's like if I play out the Containment Priest, then if they have a Double Daze as the last 2 cards, I largely just lose the game. Whereas if I just Force of Will this, I can play around that. And I think I'm far enough ahead that I'm fine to play around that. Because it's like, this line is so face up, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to replay the Containment Priest. Blah, 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 blah. That, like, I respect my opponent enough to think they have a plan for that. Oh, what's happening? Okay. There was some lag. It's the concession lag that MTG does. So, yeah. And then, it feels spewy, but, for the reasons we talked about, I think it was correct to waste quote unquote the 2 cards there. And because we know now that they are just kind of all in on the graveyard plan, I think we can bring in this extra card. What do we cut in that case? Probably a Phelia. This is a little better against the fair game plan. Because like blinking your Quantum Riddler to get value is like a way you can pull ahead. Blinking Murktide Regents, stuff like that. Yeah, I think this is the swap I will make. Let's run it. Actually, do I want to... I was thinking if I wanted the 4th Force of Will back. Rest in Peace is a solid card. I will keep... Yeah, so 2 pieces of Graveyard Hate here is good. It means my opponent can't Thoughtseize both of them. And now I have a decision, right? Am I supposed to ponder? Okay, I don't have a decision anymore. They took the Tamiyo. I guess deciding that they can't get around both pieces of Graveyard Hate. Yeah, I'm gonna ponder, look for like Force of Will. Yeah, that's Force of Will. I guess I want both, and then I'll draw the other island. When it has Brainstormed. I guess the question becomes, am I playing around Daze or am I playing around Wasteland? Alright, let's see what they take. I feel like I have the tools to deal with everything. It's just a matter of if I get to cast them all. Because this is obviously non-basic planes. I think I just do this now so that if they Daze it... Because if they Wasteland me... I'm going to play the Containment Priest. And if they Daze at that point, they get to use their mana more fully. So I think I'm just going to do this. Wasteland plus Murktide Regent would be annoying here. I'd only have a few turns to find a white source of mana. Okay, it looks like that's not what they had, which is good for me. I'm going to start pressuring their life total. Obviously, they have Bowmasters. However, I have Dress Down to counter that. And Containment Priest having Flash really helps a lot versus, like, Base and Borrower, which is the most common way that these decks push through the Graveyard Hate. Yeah, it feels like my opponent just has a ton of like graveyard-based cards, right? Because they weren't cantripping, they weren't playing Tamiyo. I guess they might not play Tamiyo because of the face-up Karakas. Maybe the Tamiyo's in the range, but definitely like an Entomb. Maybe a Force of Will at this point. Maybe Murktide, and they're trying to play around Celestial Purge. Unclear. Well, either way, I'm not cycling the Stress Down, so. Second Priest is, I think, good. I'll certainly play it. Let me put it that way. Priest is nice too, where it's like, let's say they play a Tamiyo, I gotta go to Karakas or Swords to Plowshares it, and they Brainstorm in the end step. It's just a Planeswalker with 2 loyalty that I can then attack. We'll double my clock. Also playing around Brazen Borrower. It did have a Tamiyo. So if I Force of Will this, pitching Force of Will, it does kill them 2 turns faster, which I think is what I want. And then I still have 3 pieces of interaction for like Murktide Regent. That is fine. Those forces were always going to trade in that way. And at this point, I'd like to draw a land so that I can do multiple things. Like I have Containment Priest and Dress Down now available to me. You know, if it doesn't work. Oh, okay. I think I'm still in decent shape, right? Because they can't actually Entomb Reanimate right now, and Dress Down is really stopping a lot of what they're able to do here. Like Dress Down makes Murktide enter as a 3/3. It stops the ETB on Archon or Atraxa. Obviously, Atraxa I have Karakas for, so like let's say the last card is Animate Dead. Now I just Dress Down, stop the ETB, and then Swords it. Yeah, they have the Entomb. They're thinking what they can possibly Entomb for, I guess, is the question. If they get Barrowgoyf, I can Dress Down, make it an 0/1, and then Swords to Plowshares it. And then they're at 1 life. Yeah, I think this is kind of, we saw in game 1, we saw the power of the Entomb Reanimate deck, but then we also saw the downside in the cyber games where it's just like sometimes you just cannot beat a piece of graveyard hate. Just like that's just how the deck is built, you know? It's a large package to cut, 4 Entombs, 4 Reanimates, 2 Fatties. That's a lot of cards to cut. Really hard to find enough things to bring in depending on the matchup, and sometimes your draw just cannot beat, a Grafdigger's Cage, or in this case a Containment Priest, where and even if you bounce it with Brazen Borrower, it just comes back down again. Obviously here Bitter Triumph was a permanent answer, but it was attacking them, and so their life total was low enough that they, like by the time they found the Bitter Triumph, their life total was low enough that Reanimate doesn't work. So obviously it's a very powerful deck, using very strong cards. Entomb is very strong, Tamiyo is very strong. Thoughtseize is a really well-positioned card right now. But it's definitely not an impervious strategy the way it might have been previously. But yeah, all right, 2-0, we will go to the next round of our set. All right, back for round 3, we are on the draw. Our hand seems pretty good. We have Force of Will if my opponent is a combo deck. We have Source of Plowshares if they are a creature deck, and we have Tamiyo to do something proactive. Opponent leads on Basic Island and casts a Ponder. So I think we are just going to lead on Tamiyo. Also, they're on a mulligan to 6, which I'm not going to read too much into. Alrighty. I didn't daze it and didn't really think about pause for too long. Okay. That makes sense. I do think I just want to Force Will this stock up. I'm gonna pitch the Ponder here. If they have to show and tell in an Atraxa, Dress Down can be good there. And I think getting to hold up Phelia or Dress Down is pretty strong. I have a question of what do I do in the end step if they do nothing? Do I crack the clue or do I play Phelia? Okay, so I'm gonna let this happen because if they have Emrakul, I want to be able to have Swords to Plowshares, Anna. And for those wondering, this is how it's supposed to work. So if you put both these in at the same time, Atraxa does not. And I think I'm just going to crack the clue here. There's no reason to swords right now. I can just untap first. I'm going to start by playing swords. I will attack. And I think now I'm happy to flip the Tamiyo with the Brainstorm just because I want to rebuy Force of Will as soon as possible. I think it's just land Phelia. I don't think Phelia is what I'm working towards here. I think I just want to be able to cantrip and cast things like Narset, cast things like Teferi. Do everything I need to. Opponent surveils away a land, which makes sense. One thing I will say is, with this Consign, staying above 15 has some like merit to it. Just because you could Consign an Emrakul Annihilate and survive at 1. So I'm going to keep the back to basics where I don't think I can stay above 15 this game. I just want to, fetch and do stuff with my mana. But since I've drawn this Force of Will, I'm going to start using Tamiyo to work towards ultimate. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just supposed to... Well, okay. I guess I'll fetch first and crack my clue. Huh, okay. So what do I lose to? Not much. I think I just let this resolve and put in the Karakas, and then I can just bounce this. I was thinking if it's Atraxa, I can Consign it and then bounce it. If it's Emrakul, obviously I just get to bounce it. If they put in something like Sneak Attack or Omniscience, I lose to potentially top decking things, but I felt like that was not that likely. And I'm just gonna cut their Ancient Tomb off and work towards Tamiyo Ultimate. So, Sneak and Show is not a deck I mentioned in the deck tech, but I do think a lot of these like Consign, Dress Down type cards do also interact well versus them. And it kind of makes sense, right? Where it's like, if you're bringing these cards in for Blue-Black Reanimator, this is also a big monster deck, so it stands to reason that they would be similar. Yeah, I'm going to bring in the Narset, Hydroblast. I will bring in one Surgical. I think it can be okay. Double Containment Priest, obviously quite nice to have here. Celestial Purge is interesting. Consign is interesting. I think I'm cutting this. What if I just cut the Phelias and hope to win with complete control? Just get complete control of the game, alt Tamiyo or just play a Riddler. Obviously Stern Scolding, easy cut. And I think just run it like this. Prismatic Ending is like, you maybe want it for like defense grid. I could see that. But I think I'm going to try it like this. And, I'm leaving in all the sorts of Plowshares for kind of the things we saw in that game where, I have a lot of ways to handle the ETBs of Atraxa. Dress Down, lets me target Emrakul with Swords of Plowshares. So, for these cards to be effective, you need to pair them with removal. So this is what I'm going to try to do. There's a lot of decks, a lot of interactive decks, when you pair into Sneak and Show, are cutting the removal, and it's usually correct. But I think because this is the interaction suite I've chosen, this is what I'm going to go for. I will keep this. Obviously, this might just end up being a little too slow. Containment Priest on the draw. Containment Priest, if you put in Containment Priest off Show and Tell, it does not do what you want it to. little bit worse. So it's not as good as Dress Down in terms of like a thing you can put in off show and tell. Let's see if they kept or shuffled off the ponder. They chose to shuffle. Okay, there's Dress Down. So now this is interesting, right? Where it's like, let's say they cast show and tell. If I think they're going to put in Atraxa, then I would want to put in Dress Down, right? To stifle the trigger. But if I think they're putting Emrakul, obviously I want to put in a land that I could play Teferi. I do think the deck plays more Atraxas than Emrakuls. Either that or it's like even split. But I think if I had the choice, I would put in the Dress Down. Also, it's like Emrakul's like the scary... Like if you have both, you're probably playing Atraxa first just because that one feels less scary to... Like what if I have Karakas, you know, or land Teferi? You know, they don't want to deal with that. Am I playing this Containment Priest? I think I am. Just because I probably want to untap and play a Planeswalker here. I'm not sure which one. Probably Narset. Just because Teferi I want to save for the very end so that I can bounce things. So we're a little cold to sneak attack right now. If they have show and tell, then obviously Dress Down can help us. But if they just have sneak attack, they could be in tough shape. They could also have nothing though. Just like fatties and lands. I bought 3 cards that Narset can't take, so I definitely want to minus before shuffling my library with either of these fetch lands. I think I want Swords to Plowshares actually, for, you know, the reasons we talked about. I think it's like better than nothing, weirdly enough. And I don't want to play out the Teferi just yet. I'm gonna get my Surveil land. Yeah, right now I'm reading them for just like, you know, maybe a land, probably 2 big creatures. I really like Hydroblast here. But I think I can cantrip into it if I really have to. Like with the Dress Down. And obviously they don't have anything yet, right, that I need to do with this Hydroblast. So it's like they'd have to top deck it. Alright, so they do have show and tell. So I will say okay. I will put in Dress Down. And before it goes away, I will attempt to Swords the Emrakul. Right. 30 life's a lot, but I believe in myself, we'll say. And I think I'm going to lead on the other Narset. You can just find, you know, Force of Will. Consign seems good. Importantly, Karakas did go to the bottom. I'm going to save that for a turn. They're very close to hard casting Omniscience. It's crazy. Minus again. Did find the Force of Will. Yeah, I'm just going to flip her now. Put back land. And getting a bit of lag. Unsure if it's concession lag or just regular MTG lag. Okay, so it was concession lag. Alright, yeah, so got there 2-0 against Sneak and Show. It's doing a lot of the same things as Blueback Reanimator in the sense of like our tech cards interact well with it. So I think that's we saw the games play out that way. And yeah, I will be back for the end of set review. All right, welcome back to the end of set review. So we played against a good smattering of decks. We played against Sneak and Show. We played against Blue-Black Reanimator, and then we also played against Red-Green Food Chain, but it was doing a lot of the prison things. I think the games sort of played out a similar way that I would expect games against prison to play out. So not too far removed. And had a very good showing. Able to win all 3 matches and highlight kind of a lot of the tech cards that I mentioned in the deck tech. Just Dress Down coming in clutch against Sneak and Show, which even though that's not what we're directly targeting, is having a similar interaction as it would against Reanimate targeting Atraxa effectively. And we got to do the Riddler thing a couple times, Phelia thing a couple times. Deck just seems well positioned, has good answers to a lot of what the format is doing, and coming off the challenge top 4 from the day before, this is definitely on my short list for things I would be considering for Eternal Weekend. I wouldn't feel so great about taking this into a field that I didn't think would be competitive, if that makes any sense. A lot of the cards in our deck are, targeted specifically for the narrow metagame that we have been presented with. And, if you just pair into, a generic mid-ranger control deck playing removal and card advantage, having Dress Down and Consign might not fare so well there. Whereas, these are cards you want versus, the popular decks that are at the top of the metagame. So I think it's very specifically something to attack what we are seeing in the current format, and it's doing that quite well. It does have some powerful things just like generically going on, which can help you kind of matchup independent, but certainly a lot of our flex slots are more specifically targeted towards what the format is doing and how to respond to it. It's been performing pretty well for me at that, and I am very excited to keep testing for Eternal Weekend. And if I have any new ideas, any new strategies, I will certainly be posting them on this channel. So hope you all enjoyed and had fun, and until next time, bye guys.